Come to the place of Halloween, come one, come all, bring self and scream. To Pumpkin Patch and Witch's Glen, Graveyard Asylum and Spider's Den. So come along and mind the ghost. It's Bibbles playing Planet Coaster.
Hello, I'm Mr. Pibbles, but you can call me Peter, and welcome back to our Halloween series here in Planet Coaster 2. And now in the last episode we got all of this done. The start to the hub of this park, that being Creep Street. Now I've got a little bit done off camera in the way of bits and detailing here and there. And we got this, our Scaroplane in and done. Now, before we get any further, let me just quickly turn the lights on. Okay, let's go. So, in this episode we will be sorting all of this area here with a few more bits and pieces, a flower bed or two, and a souvenir shop. So without further ado, let's get straight into the time-lapse. Yes, hello, and welcome to the time-lapse. I will be your host. Your ghost host, if you will. I believe that's probably copyrighted somewhere or other. But yes, hello and welcome back to our Halloween Park series here in Planet Coaster 2. Now, what are we doing today? Well, as I mentioned at the start of this video, we are working on the front of the park and the latter half of our opening street, that being this Creep Street, which is quite fun. You know, I came up with this idea and I've decided to stick with it, so it's all good. And what are we doing here? Well, we are building a souvenir shop. You know, usually I'd save this for a little bit later in the series, but because we don't have many episodes of this, I thought I'd just get straight in and build it now while we're working on this area. And the main thing about this is I had this very kind of clear idea of what I wanted this to look like, because obviously I'm building this whole area. Path-wise, I built it all out of hexagons, and I wanted kind of this building to sit into a hexagon of its own, but like half a hexagon, and all of that, if any of that makes sense. So I came up with this idea of it having these bits and pieces, and I almost wanted it to feel like an old cinema, which will become more apparent the further we get into this build. But what are we doing for starters? Well, we're just laying the framework with these pillars. It's different to all the other pillars that we've used, but that's fun. And just adding these in here and then copying them over, it looks quite nice. And I really like the archways that we've got going along, and it's really cool. And now we're adding a roof. And I decided to use this brick floor as the roof because it just worked well enough as it is, and it kind of does everything I needed it to do. So adding in these other pillars that we know I am a fan of here, like this and like this, just adds a bit of structural support to the outside of this building, which is good. And we're finally on to adding the tills. Now, I didn't know where I wanted the tills, and then I went, you know what, actually they look good along this wall. Hence why they're here along this specific wall. And it kind of means that we can come in and stick all of these bits and pieces down and make this place look nice. Now, I didn't do as much as I did in my Challenge Park series, where, you know, I go in and I change what everything's showing and all of that, because, you know, I didn't necessarily have the time to do that today. So instead, we're just placing down shelves wherever they go, and we'll do some more of that in a bit. But first, it's the tills, putting down these brown trim alongside the lovely, amazing pillars, and that just nestles it into the wall so nicely that I think it just works. And then sinking these windows into the wall behind it just adds a little bit of variety that I think this build needed. I'm putting in a couple of shelves around here for some t-shirts, along with a little poster display next to it. And then onto the pillars, you know, that little shelf. We don't want any pool floats, so instead we go for these postcards. And then along here it's just some regular shelves, because, you know, what else do you need? And that's the one annoying thing, is that you can't put, you know, them on the other side neatly, but we live, we learn. And then we change the colour of these to fit the vibe, that being a lovely brown, and a lovely brown, and a lovely brown, and yeah. So I can't complain too much about that. And coming in here, just adding in this trim along the top, again, to kind of break up the brick wall a little bit more than we have been doing. And then adding some more shelves in these island displays, which I thought would be quite nice. And I toy around with where I want them, because, you know, they don't quite look right, but, you know, again, this is another we live, we learn. You know, things don't necessarily need to look right, they just need to look okay. And I looked at this and I went, that doesn't look right, but I'm going to stick with it. Because, as I say, we've only got a limited amount of time for this series, and I'm already doing more than enough off camera for this series, but that is that is something we'll jump into later in this episode. But yes, coming in and opening the shop just to get a sense of the lighting. You know, I haven't necessarily been worried about lighting during these videos, but I really wanted to get in and have a play around with it. And firstly, these bottle lamps that came with the sorcery pack, absolutely brilliant. And they just fit onto this shelf so nicely, as almost souvenirs in their own right, but also as kind of little bits and pieces to actually light up the place. And it's the same with these lampposts that we stick along the pillars. And then these sorcery lamps that hang from the ceiling, we'll get into those in a sec, after putting that claw in there, which I just needed a centerpiece, if I'm being entirely honest. And then sticking these in here. Now you may be wondering why I'm putting them like that, but that's to flip them, lift them up, put them in the right place, and then ascend them to the ceiling. And it gives off a nice amount of light, I think. It just looks quite nice where it is. And now we move onto the top of the building, where I try my best to figure out what to do with it. Again, this is, like I said with my with the last episode, I've done a lot more planning into this series, but that doesn't necessarily mean I know what I'm doing with each episode. And I think this is kind of the most apparent kind of version of that, in actually I've no idea where I'm sticking things. I'm just gonna see what works, and thankfully this build does work, which is good. So kind of we're mirroring the same building shape above, which is good. Just making sure it's on the right level, and yeah, it kind of does look quite nice where it is, and then adding in a little bit of trim, well, roof as trim around there, and I know that sticks out, because so what we do is we get the triangular roof, the corner roof, and we stick it in there, and that's when I notice this is wrong. Flip that round. Again, I know it's still wrong. I will fix it later, don't worry. But yes, just coming into here and just making this roof look okay. But yeah, as I say, it has that vibe that I was looking for, of almost an old cinema. And yeah, that is, as I say, the vibe that I was going for. And I think ultimately what I end up with works for what it is. The biggest thing was I didn't know whether I wanted to have bits and pieces in there, just to have this as one continuous roof or two separate roofs, well, technically three separate roofs, and I went with the three separate roofs, ultimately because it was easy, but it means that I can come in, I can stick these slopes on like that, with a little bit of more brick roof around it, and it's the same here, going boom, 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 and putting the bits in there. Now coming back, we're doing some more pillars, and I go for these keep pillars instead of the ones we have been using because they look a little bit more interesting than just using the same pillars throughout. And as I say, I know I wanted the building to look like an old cinema. There's the cinema sign going in, and I thought actually using the same trim wouldn't necessarily look, the greatest, so instead we go for this one and the keep pillars that we've got there, which is good. Yes, and then you can see me here trying my hardest to figure out how I'm getting a thing that says cinema around the side of this. And I'm going to give you a plot twist right now. I give up on trying to do that because that just doesn't look right. So instead what we do is we sink that in and we don't. And I'm really having a hard time figuring out what I want this to do. But this is what we do. We go in here, we get these ones, and we make it say cinema in our lovely little font, and then pulling that out to there, that just looks quite nice. And then I lose editing privileges on it, so I have to redo it all again. So we've got the Spookton cinema here, and getting that sign out there, that works quite well, and it just looks quite nice from the outset, so that is quite good. You can't complain too much about it. And coming back in and putting some windows around and about, you can't complain too much. Windows are what makes this, and it is here that I notice, hang on, that's not supposed to be there, and move these bits around like that, and sink that back into the wall so guests can't get through. And then just sticking that down there makes this look a little nicer. And there is our handy dandy little cut in the footage. As I say, I spent another kind of half an hour off camera to get to this point. And we are at the point now where I have done the rest of the buildings, which you can probably see in the background of this. There's all sorts. There's bits and pieces where buildings have roofs inside of them, and they slant every wrong way, and every which way, and we are now working on this piece of archway here, which is the one that will take us into, whatever area is this way, because, as I say, I know I've done all of these bespoke archways for each of the different portals. I call them portals in the Epic Universe sense of the word, in that, they're not quite portals, but they take you from one land to another, which is ultimately what I was trying to do with these. And playing around with these roofs here, just kind of clicking them down, getting them in place. They're not grid roofs, which is something I hadn't really played around with, and getting them in there, and then trying out sort of with some smaller slopes inside. This sort of, I think the best way to call it is almost towers. It has sort of these two towers, and, it doesn't look too bad. And again, it just makes it different from everything else, so you can't complain too much. And it is just a matter now of theming up these bits and pieces with our beams and with our bits of trim. As I say, you can see me here getting these in. And again, it takes a bit of time for the building to slowly worm its way into shape, but once it's where I want it to be, it looks good, as you can see there. And then kind of coming back to get this sorcery plaque. I really like this gargoyle plaque, and I like where I've put it so that it almost looks like it's perching on the wooden arch, which is quite fun. And then coming in and putting this wall here just to build a little bit of a building in the corner to kind of cap this town off. And this is the last building we need to build, which is good. And then coming in, putting these roofs down, adding in, the townhouse roof like we need to. And then coming in and making these pillars fit in the way they need to. It looks slightly wonky, but then again, that's the point of this. It's meant to look slightly wonky. And then just putting in the industrial door with the bay window above it twice, just to add again a little bit of variety. You know, I wanted every building to look slightly different in this, and I think ultimately what I've ended up with I like quite a lot, so I can't complain too much. And then coming in and just adding a little bit of trim onto the end of this. It does look quite nice. So I can't complain too much about it. And then coming in and putting these gothic plaques in here, almost as a bit of a fun kind of toy around with the idea of, this bit of roof here. It's not too bad. But yeah, it is all fun. And I am really enjoying playing around with kind of this and getting in and doing a little bit more detail around and all of that than we have been doing in the challenge park, which I promise we will get back to at some point. Now coming in and just deleting the bit of path there around this bit of stairs here, just so guests don't walk into the stairs. And yeah, and then finally we get onto the little bit of kind of main theming for this little area, and that is a flower bed, or well, I suppose plant bed is probably a better term, because it's not just flowers that are in there. In fact, there are hardly any flowers in there, but there we go. And coming in and putting these down, we've now got this rectangular plot of land that we can then take and sink these modular planters into, which is quite fun. And just making them kind of have that same colour scheme as the rest of the land, it does look quite nice. But yes, I am a fan of planters in this game. They're just a really nice way to kind of get in and have a play around with sort of this idea of just getting some extra bit of set dressing around, which, you know, is very handy from time to time. It's not always easy to kind of come in and go, okay, what do I put here? But realizing, I can put a flower bed in, or fountain, or possibly even, I can make this somewhere where people can sit down and eat. Looks quite nice. And then, obviously, coming in here and putting some spruce trees down to add a little bit of greenery to this area. Like that. And that's me playing around with sort of the random placement things that were added into the game that I haven't really played around with before. And coming in, putting some spooky vines around the trunks of these trees just to make them look a little bit more sort of overgrown and, well, spooky. And now we come in with the vine pieces to kind of create almost this square in the middle so that we can kind of sink something into it, namely this bush. And it kind of does make it look like a little bit of an overgrown mess, which is perfect. And yeah, it's just playing around with a lot of different types of foliage and seeing what looks nice, like these dry, I think they're ironwood. These dry bushes look quite nice. The rhododendrons, again, look quite nice in there. And then coming in and getting the rose bush, but making the roses purple, is just like the tip on the end of the iceberg, as it were, to kind of add in just a little bit of colour into this overall slightly bleak planter. And yeah, it does look quite nice with kind of all the coloured flowers in there. And again, it looks like it's been overclaimed by sort of these vines and these weeds and stuff, which is perfect. You know, it's that sort of, it needs to look slightly dead, slightly dying, because this is overall meant to be a slightly spooky build, which is fun. And now you can see me kind of coming in, playing around with other types of foliage like these trees and getting them in, and ultimately it just doesn't look necessarily right. So unfortunately this is just about where I'm going to end the time lapse in a sec, so I will see you in real time after we've got rid of all of these trees. See you in a sec. Okay, hello and welcome back to Real Time. Now we've got a bit done in this episode and our lovely little creep street is basically done. Obviously we've got this first section here where you come in. This was all done in the last episode, but now if you come in through here, you can come across here and see everything over there. We've got a latter half and we've got a souvenir shop. So we can't really complain at all. Now if you enjoyed this episode, then please feel free to give me a like, give me a comment, possibly even a subscribe if I'm lucky, and I will see you in the next episode. Roll that outro.